This is Miss Kerksieck. I'm so excited to be with y'all today. The book that I'm going to read for y'all is called Enemy Pie, and it is by Derek Munson, illustrated by Tara Callahan King. Excuse me. All right, Enemy Pie. Before we get started, what is an enemy? An enemy is usually somebody that's maybe like your foe or someone that you don't get along with. An enemy is usually someone that you're against, right? That you don't like, that you're very against. Okay, here we go. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been the perfect summer, but it wasn't. I wonder what's going to happen. It's called Enemy Pie. It was good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me and struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood, but as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe off the book off the kitchen shelf. Inside there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at me. Enemy pie, he said. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. All kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into pie for an enemy. I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think I needed those. I gave him gum I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I wonder what they're going to make. What would you put in your enemy pie? Ugh, that sounds disgusting. I wouldn't want to be your enemy. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending all the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I wonder why it smells good if it's got all these nasty ingredients for your enemy. What could be the reason? I went to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like a plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to my enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. What do you think? I think the hair falling out thing would be a nightmare. I agree. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. I wonder what his job's going to be. His job. Well, I guess he's got to take it to them or something. He talked quietly. There's one part of enemy pie that I can't do, Dad said. In order for it to work, you need to spend the day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but it's the only way the enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Dad asked. Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike down to his house and I knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. Why do you think that Jeremy was confused? Maybe he didn't really like our main character either. I don't know. Let's see. We rode bikes for a while, played on the trampoline, then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls. But we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course I couldn't tell Dad that since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he'd wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. His tone seems to kind of be changing a little bit. He was being nice to his enemy? Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and went over the house and into the backyard. We climbed over the fence to find it, and the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. Oh no! What is in the tree house? Anybody remember what was in the tree house? Ah! Do you think he's going to let him go up there? Find out he's his enemy? Oh my gosh. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her in. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him in. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. He's not really acting like an enemy, is he? Not really acting mean. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut into the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it's sure nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy, but Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Oh my goodness, this could be a disaster. If they give Jeremy this enemy pie, oh no, this could be bad news. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pies like this. It was at that point I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat the enemy pie. He was my friend, not my enemy. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poison or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. Oh, I had saved his life. I was a hero. This sounds really bad. What's he going to do? How's he going to explain this? How's he going to explain he tried to make poisonous pie for his enemy, but now his friend? What's he going to do? If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through his mouthful, and that was all he said. I sat there watching him eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them were losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious! Wonder what kind of pie this really was. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline the next morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or bad breath, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get the answer, because I just lost my best enemy. So his enemy, as we read the book, we realized maybe they just didn't know each other, and that's why they weren't friends at the beginning, because they weren't really sure about the other person and maybe just didn't give them a benefit of the doubt, didn't try to get to know them. So instead of enemy pie, it turned to friendship pie. I hope you'll have a great break, and I'll see y'all when we come back. Bye.